Montana Territory, 1889. For 6 years, the abandoned Mercer Ranch had stood like a grave beneath the wide Montana sky. 2 buyers had come to inspect its 260 acres. Neither had bothered to dismount. Then Caleb Turner arrived, with 11 years of savings in his pocket and a stubborn belief that land everyone else had given up on might still be worth saving. He spent nearly every dollar he owned buying the place. The fences were broken, the barn roof had collapsed, and the fields had gone wild. But Caleb looked across the ruined property and saw a future. 3 days later, while repairing the southern fence, he heard hoofbeats. A young woman named Evelyn Blackwood rode through his gate on a magnificent chestnut mare. She was the daughter of Henry Blackwood, owner of the largest ranch in the county. "My father sent me with an offer," she said. $800 if you sell this place and leave." Caleb drove another fence post into the earth. "Tell your father this land cost me 11 years of my life. $800 can't buy those years back." Evelyn studied him before riding away. Caleb thought that would be the end of it. He was wrong. She returned 3 days later and watched him setting another post. "You're doing that wrong," she said. Caleb frowned. Evelyn explained that the frozen winters had changed the soil, and the post needed to lean slightly against the direction of the wire tension. Caleb reluctantly allowed her to correct it. She was right. The next day, she returned again. Soon, they were repairing the fence together. Evelyn knew the valley better than any map. She knew which fields flooded, where grain would grow, and where the ground remained dry during spring. Caleb began listening to her, and Evelyn began seeing something in him her wealthy world rarely produced. A man who cared for something because it needed caring for, not because it was already valuable. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories of courage, sacrifice, and love born beneath the endless western sky, subscribe to Hearts of the West and tell us in the comments where you're listening from today. Weeks passed, and the ruined ranch slowly began to change. But one afternoon, neither Caleb nor Evelyn noticed the Blackwood Ranch foreman watching them from a distant ridge. That evening, Henry Blackwood learned everything. The following morning, he rode directly to Caleb's ranch. "My daughter is not for you," Henry said. Caleb met his eyes. "I haven't asked her for anything." Henry looked at the broken house and patched barn. "You will, and when you do, remember this. She deserves more than a man who has nothing." Caleb's expression did not change. "With respect, sir, I believe that's her decision." Henry's eyes hardened. He mounted his horse and rode away. Caleb returned to work, unaware that before the summer ended, he would risk his life to save the very man who despised him. Evelyn refused to stop visiting Caleb. When her father ordered her to stay away, she looked directly at him and said, "I am 22 years old. You taught me to think for myself. You cannot punish me now because I finally did." Henry had no answer that could change her mind. Summer arrived, and Caleb's ranch slowly came back to life. The fence stood straight. Oats grew in the northern field. 4 cattle became 7. The barn roof was patched with salvaged timber. Evelyn continued helping, correcting Caleb when he was wrong and respecting him when he listened. Then, on a hot July night, Caleb woke to the smell of smoke. A red glow burned against the northern horizon. The Blackwood Ranch was on fire. Caleb saddled his horse and rode toward it. By the time he arrived, the eastern barn was lost, and flames were spreading toward the breeding stable. Inside were 11 valuable horses. "The roof is going!" the foreman shouted. "Nobody can enter!" But the horses were screaming. Caleb soaked his bandana in a water trough and pulled open the stable door. "You'll die in there!" someone shouted. Caleb disappeared into the smoke. One by one, he brought the horses out. On his 8th trip, Evelyn arrived and saw him emerge with blood running down his face. "How many are left?" he asked. "3," the foreman answered. Evelyn grabbed Caleb's arm. "Don't go back!" Caleb looked toward the burning stable. "They're trapped!" He pulled away and disappeared into the flames. He freed the 9th horse, then the 10th. At the final stall, he found something he had not expected. A young ranch hand lay unconscious beneath a fallen beam. Caleb freed the final horse, lifted the man across his shoulders, and started toward the rear wall just as the roof collapsed. Outside, Evelyn screamed his name. For several seconds, there was nothing but fire. Then the last horse burst through a broken section of the wall. Caleb stumbled behind it, carrying the unconscious ranch hand. He collapsed in the dirt. For 2 days, Caleb did not wake. When he finally opened his eyes, Henry Blackwood was sitting beside his bed. "You saved 11 horses and one of my men," Henry said. "Why?" Caleb looked at him. "Why wouldn't I?" Henry's jaw tightened. "After everything I said to you?" Caleb answered quietly. "The horses never said any of it." Henry had no response. A week later, Caleb returned to his ranch. Months passed. Then winter arrived early. Snow buried the valley, and temperatures fell dangerously low. One morning, Evelyn rode through the storm to Caleb's door, terrified. 300 of our cattle are trapped in the eastern basin," she said. Caleb reached for his coat. "Where is your father?" Evelyn's eyes filled with fear. "He went after them yesterday. He never came back." Caleb sidled his horse before Evelyn could finish speaking. She tried to follow, but he stopped her. "If I don't return, someone needs to organize another search." Then he rode into the storm. Visibility disappeared within minutes. Snow erased the trail. But Caleb knew the valley from months of listening to Evelyn describe every ridge and basin. Hours later, he found the missing cattle crowded near a frozen ravine. Then he saw a dead horse, half buried in snow. Henry Blackwood lay beneath it, his leg trapped. "You again," Henry whispered when Caleb reached him. Caleb almost smiled. "Seems you keep finding trouble." It took nearly an hour to free him. Caleb tied Henry to his own saddle and began moving the cattle toward lower ground. The journey back took the entire night. When lights finally appeared through the storm, Evelyn ran from the ranch house. Her father was alive, and most of the herd had survived. Henry spent weeks recovering. He said little about what had happened, but something inside him had changed. When spring returned, he rode alone to Caleb's ranch. The place no longer looked abandoned. Green oats covered the northern field. 23 cattle grazed behind strong fences. The barn had been rebuilt. Caleb stood near the gate as Henry dismounted. "I spent 30 years believing a man's worth could be measured by the acres he owned," Henry said. Then you bought land nobody wanted and made it valuable because you refused to abandon it. Caleb remained silent. Henry looked toward the house. I was wrong about you. Caleb raised an eyebrow. That sounded painful. Henry almost smiled. Don't make me say it twice. He turned toward his horse, then stopped. And Caleb? Yes? If you intend to ask my daughter something, stop wasting time. An hour later, Evelyn arrived and found Caleb waiting beside the fence they had repaired together months earlier. What did my father want? She asked. He gave me permission to ask you something. Evelyn folded her arms. Since when do you need his permission? Caleb smiled. Apparently, I don't. He took her hand and asked her to build a life with him on the land everyone else had abandoned. Evelyn said yes. They married beneath the cottonwood trees the following June. Years later, travelers passing through the valley saw a thriving ranch where broken fences and empty fields had once stood. But Caleb and Evelyn never forgot how it began, with unwanted land, a stubborn man, and a woman who knew a fence post needed to lean 2 degrees into the tension. Because sometimes the things the world abandons are not worthless. Sometimes they are simply waiting for someone willing to stay long enough to see what they can become. And sometimes love begins not with grand promises, but with 2 people standing beside a broken fence, choosing to rebuild it together. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Hearts of the West, leave a like, and tell us in the comments. Do you believe a person's true worth is measured by what they own or by what they refuse to abandon? Until the next journey, keep your heart strong and your eyes on the western horizon.